Good day, sir. Good day, classmates. We are the reporter of Group 2 in Understanding the Self ADP code 79780. In this moment, we will tackle the modern philosopher and postmodernism. First, we will define the modern philosophy. Modern philosophy is a philosophy that arose during the modern era and associated with modernity. It is not a specific doctrine or school or thought, and those should not be confused with modernism. But there are certain assumptions shared by much of it that helps to distinguish it from earlier philosophy. The 7th and early 20th century roughly correspond to the start and end of the Western philosophy. Under the modern philosopher are René Descartes, John Locke, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, Paul Churchland, Edmund Husserl, and Maurice Jacques Merleau-Ponty. And René Descartes is a French mathematician, scientist, and philosopher because he was one of the first to abandon scholastic Aristotelianism. René Descartes was born on March 31, 1596 in Le Haye. He died in the age of 54 because his body cannot handle the illness of pneumonia. And there is no treatment in pneumonia at that time. So he died in an early age. René Descartes promoted the development of new science grounded in observation and experiment. He is generally regarded as a founder of modern philosophy. He developed a metaphysical dualism that distinguishes radically between mind, the essence of which is thinking, and matter, the essence of which is extension in 3 dimensions. Descartes' metaphysics is rationalist, based on the postulation of innate ideas of mind, matter, and God. But his physics and physiology, based on sensory experience, are mechanistic and empiricist. In Jesuit College at the Lafayette, René Descartes was a young man trained for careers in military engineering, the judiciary, and government administration, in addition to classical studies, science, mathematics, and metaphysics. In 1618, Descartes went to Breda in the Netherlands, where he spent 15 months as an informal student of mathematics and military architecture in a peacetime army of the Protestant stadtholder in Breda. Descartes was encouraged in his studies of science and mathematics by the physicist Isaac Bachman, for whom he wrote the Compendium of Music, written in 1618, published in 1650. His first surviving work, while in Bohemia in 1619, he invented analytic geometry, a method of solving geometry geometric problems algebraically and algebraic problems geometrically. He also devised a universal method of deductive reasoning based on mathematics that is applicable to all the sciences.
John Locke was an English philosopher and physician, widely regarded as one of the most influential of Enlightenment thinkers and commonly known as the father of liberalism. John Locke is from Wellington, United Kingdom, born August 29, 1632 in England. In political theory or political philosophy, John Locke refuted the theory of the divine right of kings and argued that all persons are endowed with natural rights. Among these fundamental natural rights, Locke said, are life, liberty, and property. Locke believed that the most basic human law of nature is the preservation of mankind, and the rulers of the rights who fail to protect those rights may be removed by the people by force if necessary. Perhaps the most central concept in Locke's political philosophy is his theory of natural law and natural rights. The natural law concept existed long before Locke as a way of expressing the idea that there were certain moral truths that applied to all people, regardless of the particular place where they lived or the agreements they had made. John Locke is regarded as one of the most influential philosophers of modern times. He founded the modern theory of liberalism and made an exceptional contribution to modern philosophical empiricism. He was also influential in the areas of theology, religious tolerance, and educational theory. John Locke's most famous works are an essay concerning human understanding in 1689, in which he developed history of ideas and his account of the origins of human knowledge and experience, and two treatises of government, the first edition published in 1690 but substantially composed before 1683. At the age of 72, John Locke died on October 28, 1704. John Locke was influenced by Jean-Jacques Rousseau and Immanuel Kant. David Hume was a Scottish Enlightenment philosopher, historian, economist, librarian, and essayist, and he was born in 7 May 1711. David Hume lived in Edinburgh. Hume was the younger son of Joseph Hume, the modestly circumstanced laird or lord of Nine Walls, a small estate adjoining the village of Chernside. He entered Edinburgh University when he was just about 12 years old, and left at 14 or 15 years old, as was then usual conceived of philosophy as the inductive, experimental science of human nature. Taking the scientific method of the English physicist Sir Isaac Newton as his model and building on the epistemology of the English philosopher John Locke, Hume tried to describe how the minds work in acquiring what is called knowledge. He concluded that no theory of reality is possible. There can be no knowledge of anything beyond experience. David Hume is best known today for his highly influential system of philosophical empiricism, skepticism, and naturalism. David Hume is famous for the elegance of his prose, for his radical empiricism. David Hume for his skepticism of religion, for his critical account of causation, for his naturalistic theory of mind, for his thesis that reason is the slave of the passions, and for waking Immanuel Kant from his dogmatic slumber. David Hume wrote philosophical works, including the Treatise of Human Nature in 1739-40, an inquiry concerning the principles of morals in 1751, an inquiry and the dialogues concerning natural religion, posthumously published in 1779. In 1734, after trying his hand in merchant's office in Bristol, he came to the turning point of his life and retired to France for 3 years. Most of this time he spent at La Fleche on the Loire in the Old Anjou, studying and writing a treatise of human nature. The treatise was Hume's attempt to formulate a full-fledged philosophical system It is divided into 3 books. The book 1 of the understanding discusses in order in the origin of ideas, the ideas of space and time, knowledge and probability, including the nature of causality, and the skeptical implication of theories of book. In Book 2 of the Passions describe an elaborate psychological machinery to explain the affective or emotional order in humans and assigns a subordinate role to reason in this mechanism. In Book 3 or on morals characterize moral goodness in terms of feeling of approval or disapproval that people have when they consider human behavior in the light of agreeable or disagreeable consequence either to themselves or to others.
Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant was a German philosopher and one of the central Enlightenment thinker. Comprehensive and systematic work in epistemology, metaphysics, ethics, autistic have made him one of the most influential figures modern Western philosophy. Immanuel Kant was born on April 22, 1724 in Königsberg, southeastern shore of the Baltic Sea. But during Kant's lifetime, Königsberg was the capital of the East Prussia, and its dominant language was German. Though geographically remote from the rest of the Prussia and other German cities, Königsberg was a major commercial center, an important military port, and relative cosmopolitan university town. Kant was born into a patrician family of the modest means. His father was a master of harness maker, and his mother was a daughter of the harness maker. Thought she was better educated than most women of his social class. Kant's family was never destitute, but his father's trade was declined during Kant's youth, and his parents all the times had relied on an extended family for financial support. Autonomy. Rather than emotion and dependence on either, authority on grace may in part reflect his youthful reaction against the petition, but although the young Kant lauded his predecessor's calling, he has deep respect and admiration for his parents, especially his mother, whose genius, fragility. Kant's parents probably influenced him much less through their petition through their petition value of hard work, honest, cleanliness, and independence, which they taught him by example.
Paul Montgomery Churchland is a Canadian philosopher known of his studies in neurophilosophy and the philosophy of mind. He was born on October 21, 1942, at the age of 78. After earning a PhD from the University of Pittsburgh under Wildred Sellars in 1969, Churchland rose to the rank of full professor at the University of Manitoba before accepting the Balch Family Endowed Chair Philosophy at the University of California, San Diego. As of February 2017, Churchland is recognized as Professor Emeritus at the UECD and is member at the Board of Trustees of the Moscow Center for Consciousness Studies of Moscow State University. Churchland is the husband of philosopher Patricia Churchland, and it has been noted that their work is similar, that they are sometimes discussed in journal, in books, as one person. The Churchland are the parents of two children named Mark Churchland and Anne Churchland. Both are neuroscientists. Churchland worked in his School of Analytic Philosophy in Western philosophy with interest in epistemology and the philosophy of science, and a specific principal interest of the philosophy of mind. Churchland lectured at the University of Toronto from 1967 to 1969 and began his independent professional career as an instructor of the University of Pittsburgh in 1969. Churchland took a position in the University of Manitoba, where he would teach for 15 years as an assistant professor in 1969 to 1974, and the associate professor in 1977 to 1979, and there from 1979 to 1989 as a full professor. That's all I can say about Churchland.
Edmund Husserl. Edmund Husserl was born on April 8, 1859 in Prostijov, Moravia, Australian Empire, and died on April 26, 1938 in Freiburg, Germany. The German philosopher Edmund Husserl is the father of the philosophical movement known as the Phenomenology. Phenomenology can be roughly described as a sustained attempt to describe experience without metaphysical and theoretical speculation. Husserl suggested that only by suspending or bracketing away the natural attitude could philosophy become its own distinctive and rigorous science, and he insisted that phenomenology is a science of consciousness rather than empirical things. Indeed, in Husserl's hands, phenomenology began as a critique of both psychologism and naturalism. Naturalism is the thesis that everything belongs to the world of nature and can be studied by the methods appropriate to studying the world. That is the method of the hard science. Husserl argued that the study of consciousness might actually be very different from the study of nature. For him, phenomenology does not proceed from the collection of large amount of data and to a general theory beyond the data itself, such as the phenomena of intentionality, of love, of two hands touching each other, and so forth. Before then, discerning what is essential and necessary to this experience. Although all of the subsequent phenomenologists like Sartre, Merleau-Ponty have contested aspects of Husserl's characterization of phenomenology,
they have nonetheless been heavily indebted in him. As such, he is arguably one of the most important and influential philosophers of 20th century. The key feature of his work and his understanding about phenomenological method are considered in what follows. Husserl completely believed in that experience is the source of all knowledge. Edmund Husserl has a saying, natural objects, for example, must be experienced before any theorizing about them can occur. Maurice Jean-Jacques Merleau-Ponty is a French philosopher and public intellectual. Was the leading proponent of existentialism and phenomenology in post-war France. Was a French phenomenological philosopher and born on March 14, 1908 in Rochefort and died in May 3, 1961 on Paris, France. Maurice Merleau-Ponty believed that physical body to be an important part of what makes up a subjective self. This idea flew in the face of two of the most heralded, yet opposing ideas in all philosophy. They are empirism and rationalism. Rationalism, when speaking of self and being. Rationalism asserts that reason and mental perception, rather than experience and physical senses, are the basis of characters and knowledge. According to many who hold this belief, the mind is the set of our consciousness. It is the subject behind what it means to be a human. Standing in contrast to rationalism is empirism. Empirism is the belief that our physical sense is the only source of knowledge. It can be empirically studied if the source of knowledge can't be seen, touched, and not in our physical senses. Here's some difference about rationalism and empirism. An empiricist may argue that our physical body and not some mystical mind makes up our sense of self, while rationalists would say, I think, therefore I am, and the empiricist would say, I sense, therefore I am. Maurice Ponty declared that rationalism and empirism both miss mark. To him, rationalism elevates the importance of minds and perception too much, while empirism too strongly negates them. Ponty argued that they are interconnected. They both are our set of knowledge, and they gives us our sense of self, like love and marriage. You can't have one without the others.
Good day everyone. The topic I gonna tackle was all about postmodernism. Postmodernism is a broad movement that developed in the mid to late 20th century across philosophy, the arts, architecture, and the criticism, marking a departure from modernism. The term has been more generally applied to describe a historical era said to follow after modernity and the tendencies of this era. For me, postmodernism from the word post, which means after, is the product of the post era only. It's just most slightly or entirely enhanced than the post era. This movement can be widely seen in trends, for example, in clothing. Before, teens loved denim jeans, whereas now teens tend to love ripped designed clothes for more appeal. Examples of postmodernism: Gravity Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon, Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino, Pale Fire by Vladimir Nabokov, Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace, White Nose by Don DeLielos, Bret Easton Ellis' American Psycho, Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwoods. Did you know the great American modernist poets of the first decades of the 20th century, Pound, Eliot, Williams, Charles Olson is the father of the postmodernists of the second half century, bridging Pound and the co-partner to such major poets as Robert Duncan and Robert Creeley. As a philosophy, postmodernism rejects concept of rationality, objectivity, and universal truth. Instead, it emphasizes the diversity of human experience and multiplicity of perspectives. Does postmodernism believe in God? Postmodern religion considers that there are no universal religious truths or laws. Rather, reality is shaped by social, historical, and cultural context according to the individual place and/or time. The difference between modernism and postmodernism. Modernist thinking is about the search of an abstract truth of life. Postmodernist thinkers believe that there is no universal truth, abstract or otherwise. Modernism attempts to construct a coherent worldview. The topic I gonna tackle was all about David Lewis. David Lewis was an American philosopher who is widely regarded as one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. Lewis taught briefly at UCLA and then at Princeton University from 1970 until his death. David Lewis was one of the most important philosophers of the 20th century. He made education. David Lewis Lewis is the most famous for his work in metaphysics, philosophy of language and semantics, in which his books on the plurality of worlds in 1986 and counterfactuals in 1970 are considered classics. Information about David Lewis. David Lewis was born on September 28, 1941 in Oberlin, Ohio, United States. He died on October 14, 2001 in Princeton, New Jersey, United States. Education: Swarthmore College, Oxford University, and Harvard University. Parents: John D. Lewis and Ruth Ewart Kellogg Lewis. Did you know that David Lewis' full name was David Kellogg Lewis? A cause of death was not known. He had struggled with health issues in recent years, surviving a heart attack and later having a pacemaker implanted. Word of Mr. Lewis' death sparked an outpouring on tributes on social media, many from Tampa Catholic alumni.
Paul-Michel Foucault, or known as Michel Foucault, was a postmodernist, though he refused to be so in his work. He defined postmodernity with reference to two guiding concepts. One is discourse and two are power. It is with the help of this concept that he characterized the postmodern phenomenon. Defining discourse, he says that it is the framework of thinking in a particular area of social life. For instance, the discourse of criminality means how people in a given society think and talk about crime. And what is important is that power works through discourse, and discourse becomes weak or strong in a comparison to power. And power, according to Foucault, is knowledge. Though, in a postmodern condition, there are discourse which are shaped by knowledge. Foucault defines postmodernity in terms of discourse and discourse, and is interpreted through power. He actually started with that truism, knowledge is power. He was particularly interested in knowledge of human beings and power that acts of human beings. Suppose we start with the statement, knowledge is power, but doubt we have any knowledge of absolute truth. If we take away the idea of absolute truth, what does knowledge mean? Maybe knowledge would be just what a group of people get together and decide is true. In one case, physical force, and in the other mutual force is exerted by a powerful minority who are those able to impose this idea of the right or the true on the majority. But how does knowledge or power get its work done? Often, knowledge of power and physical force are allied. Is when a child is pumped to teach a lesson, but primarily, knowledge or power works through language at a basic level. When a child learns to speak, he picks up the basic knowledge and rules of his culture at the same time. Postmodernism reveals the relation between power and knowledge. It is the central theme which links all the aspects of postmodernity. Foucault defined postmodernity in terms of power and knowledge, and discourse as below. Close scrutiny of the micropolitics of power relations in a different localities, contexts, and social situation leads us to conclude that there is an intimate relation between the system of knowledge discourse, which codifies techniques and practices for the exercise of social control and domination within the particular localized context. The prison, the asylum, the hospital, the university, the school, the psychiatrist's office are all examples of sites where a disparate and piecemeal organization of power is built up independently of any systematic strategy of class domination. That's all. Thank you.
Richard Mackay Rorty, educated at the University of Chicago and Yale University. He had strong interest and training in both the history of philosophy and contemporary analytic philosophy, the latter of which came to constitute the main focus of his work at Princeton University in the 1960s. He subsequently came to reject the tradition of philosophy according to which knowledge involves correct representation of a world whose existence remains wholly independent of that representation. Rorty had a long and diverse academic career, including positions at Stewart Professor of Philosophy at Princeton University, Keenan Professor of Humanities at the University of Virginia, and Professor of Comparative Literature at Stanford University. Among his influential books are Philosophy and The Mirror of Nature in 1979, Consequences of Pragmatism in 1982, and Contingency, Irony, and Solidarity in 1989. Rorty saw the idea of knowledge as a mirror of nature, as pervasive throughout the history of Western philosophy. Against the approach, Rorty advocated a novel form of American pragmatism, sometimes called neo-pragmatism, in which scientific and philosophical methods of merely a set of contingent vocabularies, which people abandon or adopt over time according to social conventions, and useful. Rorty believed abandoning representationalist accounts of knowledge and language would lead to a state of mind he referred to as ironism, in which people become completely aware of the contingency of their placement in history, and of their philosophical vocabulary, Rorty tied his brand of philosophy to the notion of social hope. He believed that without the representationalist accounts and without metaphors between the mind and the world, human society would have more peaceful. He also emphasized the reasons why the international of culture has conversation. Bernstein in 1971 constitutes the crucial concept of the post-philosophical culture determined to abandon representationalist accounts of traditional epistemology, incorporating Americans' pragmatism with metaphysical naturalism. 6 ideas from Eastern philosophy. Eastern philosophy has always had a very similar goal to Western philosophy, that of making us wiser, less agitated, and more thoughtful, and reader to appreciate our lives. However, the way it has gone about this has been intriguingly different. In East, philosophy has taught its lessons via tea drinking ceremonies, walks in bamboo forest, contemplations of rivers, and ritualized flower arranging session. Here are few ideas to offer as the distinctive wisdom of a content and enrich our nation, of which philosophy might really be. 1. Life is suffering. The first and central noble truth of the Buddha is that life is unavoidably about suffering. The Buddha continually seeks to adjust our expectations so we will know what to expect. Sex will disappoint us, youth will disappear, money won't spare us pain. For the Buddha, the wise person should take care to grow completely at home with the ordinary shambles of existence. 2. Metta is the word which, in the Indian language of Pali, means benevolence, kindness, or tenderness. It is one of the most important ideas in Buddhism. Buddhism recommends a daily ritual meditation to foster this attitude. The meditation begins with a call to think very carefully every morning of a particular individual with whom one tends to get irritated or to whom one feels aggressive or cold, and in place of one's normal hostile impulses. 3. Guanyin. Guanyin is a saintly female figure in East Asia Buddhism, strongly associated with mercy, compassion, and kindness. She occupies a similar role within Buddhism as a Virgin Mary within Catholicism. There are shrines and temples to her all over China. One in the province of Hainan has a 108-meter statue of her. It's the fourth largest statue anywhere in the world. 4. Wu-wei. Wu-wei is a Chinese term at the heart of philosophy of Taoism. It is first described in the Tao Te Ching, written by the sage Lao Tzu in the 6th century BC. Wu-wei means not making an effort, going with the flow, but it doesn't in any way imply laziness or sloth. It suggests rather an international surrender of the will based on a wise recognition of the need. 5. Bamboo as wisdom. East Asia has been called the bamboo civilization, not merely because bamboo has been widely used in daily life, but also because its symbolic qualities have been described and celebrated for hundreds of years in the philosophy of Taoism. Bamboo is surprisingly classified as a grass rather than a tree, yet it is tall and strong enough to create groves and forests. Unlike a tree trunk, the stems of bamboo are hollow, but its inner emptiness is a source of its vigor. 6. Kintsugi. Since the 6th century, Zen Buddhist philosophy in Japan has been alive to the particular beauty and wisdom of things which have been repaired. Kintsugi is a compound of two ideas. Ken, meaning in Japanese golden, and tsuge, meaning joinery. In Zen aesthetics are broken pieces of an accidentally smashed pot should never just be tossed away. They should be carefully picked up, reassembled, and then glued together with lacquer. Inflected with a luxuriant gold powder, there shall be no attempt to disguise the damage. The point is to render the fault lines because the pressure veins of gold are there to emphasize that bricks have a rich merit all of their own.